FAIR, FAIR stands for Food, Agriculture, Restaurants, and Establishments. We are a nonprofit membership-based trade association that represents everything really from field to fork. So farmers are a part of our organization. And one of the issues that we're looking at as an organization is the loss of farmland here in the state of Idaho. So we're so grateful that David has joined us again with the American Farmland Trust to cover some thoughts on conservation, easement, and really talk about the Sunny Slope region and what's happening there. And we look forward to your questions. I'll be moderating this roundtable. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, come off mute. It'll be, David will leave time for questions. So if you could just leave yourself muted in the meantime while David's talking, that would be great. And then there's a little hand that you can raise or just throw something in the chat or come off of mute when you're ready to ask your question. So thanks so much. And without further ado, I'll let David continue. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see some faces that I recognize. Tina and Sabrina, I believe we were both a couple weeks ago at that last ag meeting. And then Amy, you might have been at the first ag meeting at Development Services now, I guess about a month ago. Is that right? I think I might have seen you there. Didn't get a chance to introduce myself, but thanks for coming. And then Hadley, where are you located?
We're on the corner of Sims and Chicken Dinner on Sunny Slope.
Okay, all right, very good. So I've got my Sunny Slope crew here today. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to ask either, use the little raise your hand thing on Zoom or raise your real hand. I'm kind of curious just to get an idea. Who hasn't learned at least sort of a little bit about conservation easements? Is there any of you that don't know anything? Yeah, okay, because I just want to judge. I'm going to scale myself. I'll let you know. I've got a couple of extra slides if we decide we want to geek out on conservation easements. Okay, but without further ado, let's get going here. So no farms, no Idaho. No farms, no food. You may have seen this. This is a brand of American Farmland Trust. It is a brand that we use nationwide. And they published their Farms Under Threat report a couple years ago that indicated that Idaho, and in particular the Treasure Valley, was some of the highest conversion rates of productive ag land in the country. And therefore, that became a priority for AFT to get a program spun up here in Idaho as quickly as possible. And so I was hired in October as the Idaho Program Manager to start delivering essentially the AFT platform here in Idaho. And so no farms, no food at the national is no farms, no Idaho here in Idaho. So we're getting ready to launch a marketing program in the next couple of months, No Farms, No Idaho marketing program. And so kind of keep an eye out for this. So you're going to start seeing this showing up on some billboards around Treasure Valley. And that's soon going to be a URL where we're going to start posting stories. So look for you, appreciate your support with that. So once again, let's talk about the 3 pillars of American Farmland Trust, who we are really quick. Our first is protecting working farms and ranches. So Idaho, University of Idaho, Ag Economic Department just recently published a report, and we are just shy of 20% of Idaho's GDP is farm and ranch income. So that's a fifth. That's a really big deal for us here in Idaho. Our second pillar is improving soil health through partnerships. There's any number of stakeholders that are all contributing to the soil health conversation. And so our position at AFT is going to be a connector and facilitator in getting that soil health information and knowledge out to growers. And then our third pillar is succession planning. As you're all very much aware that one of the challenges that we're having is that in some cases, multi-generational farm and ranch operations either do not have a next generation that wants to take over the operation, and or the escalating land values are making it more and more difficult for farmers of a new generation to get on the land. So we have resources to help support in that space. So why protect Idaho's ag land? The map that you're looking at here right now, this is from our 2020 Farms Under Threat, 2020 Farms Under Threat report. The way to look at that map is that the dark green is active farming. The sort of yellowish beige color is active ranching. And then finally, the dark gray, and I'll use my pointer here, the dark gray, so this is the Boise metro area in Treasure Valley. We've got Twin Falls down here on the Snake River Plain. You can see over here, this is the I-15 corridor. And then for our folks up north, you can see even along the US 95 corridor, so Coeur d'Alene, Sandpoint, on the way up to Bonners Ferry. So all of that red that you're seeing there, that is former productive ag land that has been converted to either high density or low density residential in the last 15 years. And another very important part of that is, of all of this that you're seeing in red in Idaho and even in our neighboring states, Spokane, and you can see up here in the Missoula Valley, also the Bitterroot Valley, 80% of that land that has been converted in the last 15 years is on prime ag soils. So we're paving over the best of the best. So, all of us know how quickly the Treasure Valley is growing. Unfortunately, the word is out, right? And here they come. So the other thing that we're challenged with is that, Idaho's a little bit behind the 8 ball as far as actually having state policies that promote ag protection. A number of our neighboring states are already working on what are called PACE programs. And so we're having to catch up there a little bit. And then, of course, something I'd mentioned that is that, we have the baby boomers are already retiring out, looking for that Gen X, and even in some cases, millennial generation to be picking up these operations. And those folks are not there. And so in a lot of cases, if there's a lack of succession planning, a lot of these landowners, their only option is to sell out. And if I have to sell out, I want to sell it to the highest price. And guess who's going to give me that, right? Either a developer or land speculator. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing and why we need to protect ag here in Idaho. So let's talk about couple of things that are in our toolbox, our ag protection toolbox. We have purchase of development rights programs, PDRs, transfer of development rights programs, TDRs, and then the county comp plan and ag district zoning within those comp plans are some existing tools that we have available to us. And I just wanted to say, so PDRs, purchase of development rights, and TDRs, both of those tools utilize what's called a conservation easement. Okay, so that is very important to remember when we're talking about the fact that these conservation easements, what they are is they are a deed restriction. So they are essentially, they go with title on the land. They are flexible in the fact that you can actually design them and as to what you want them to protect and what can still change on the land. If it's going to be ag protection, then we definitely want to limit non-farm development, the subdivision into smaller parcels or other incompatible uses. They're an excellent tool for protecting agricultural value because what they do is they lock the land in is ag in perpetuity. So if we look at inflation adjusted land values over the last 30 years, active ag that stays in active ag is more valuable over time than active ag that gets converted into subdivision and developed on a per square foot basis. So that's really, really important. And as I mentioned, it carries with land. So it's in perpetuity. How do they work? So there's a number of PDR programs, but essentially the way that works is that the value of that conservation easement can either be donated by the landowner, or it can be purchased by a land trust. Why? The way these easements work is for them to essentially be enforceable. The easement itself needs to be held by an independent third party. They cannot be owned. So it's no different than, let's say, if you have an easement across your land for a transportation right of way or an easement for a power line. It essentially functions the same way. That third entity is who actually owns that easement. And so, how do we pay for this? We have federal dollars. The NRCS has what they call their ASEP ALE, forgive the acronym, but it is a 50% match, federal match for the cost of an easement. That can go a long way. We can also do it through philanthropic funding. And we're going to talk about that when we get to talking about the Sunny Slope area, about how some of those other funding sources could possibly be in our future. It can take a while. Just to put things in perspective, the funding, federal funding and other sources like that can take years for us to essentially cobble together. So this is not a fast process. I would say the typical easement is can be anywhere from 2 to 3 years to actually close on the deal. That said, while you're in that process, and ultimately there's little to no impact on the day-to-day agricultural use of that land, and that owners of that land can either decide to sell or lease or bequeath to their heirs, and it stays, that easement carries with the land. And then finally, because their land trust, that third party, are responsible for essentially protecting that easement, then usually that within that easement there's language for that land trust to come out and do essentially a light inspection to make sure that the agricultural operation is remaining as is, as was suggested in the easement. So benefits of an easement: permanently protects ag, and while keeping it in private ownership. Landowners, should they choose to donate the value of their easement, may be eligible for tax benefits. There's always that asterisk, consult your tax attorney. But I will generally say that ag land that has a active income producing operation on it in some way typically can leverage tax benefits. And the IRS rules on this are quite lucrative. It's a 20-year buyback on that. So you've got 20 years to buy down your donation on that easement. So, depending on what's going on with income, market cycling, if you're growing different crops or something like that, that can be a nice passive income that's running in the background for a farmer or rancher. By protecting ag, we're protecting open space, right? So it can protect our view sheds. I mean, if we think about Sunny Slope, right? Sunny Slope has that fantastic view down across the Snake River Canyon over to the Waihees. It secures the land base in the fact that by protecting ag with conservation easements, typically what happens is that, that's a grassroots, other neighbors start getting on board, and we start seeing more cohesion in protecting a larger agricultural area. Makes the land more affordable to the next generation, right? It's essentially about, once again, succession planning, sustainability of that agricultural industry. And it's how we keep that multi-generational land stewardship knowledge and wealth within the family. We're able to offer a different option than just simply having to sell out. So let's move on to the second in our toolbox real quick, which is transfer of development rights programs. So Idaho state law allows for TDR programs. They're implemented at the county planning level. For those of you out in Canyon County, you probably heard about this in the ag outreach meetings. So this generally, what we're talking about here is developers are able to purchase development rights from an agricultural landowner and then transfer those to municipalities and be able to get higher densities. So this is a really good tool to put the rooftops into the areas of improvement of the municipalities within a county, and help protect our agricultural districts. And so my understanding is that Canyon County is going to be convening a committee around this to talk about basically how they want to design this program. And one of the things that they can potentially do to actually incentivize ag protection is by upping the ratio. So let's say that the sending area, which is here to the left, the ag area, is 1 development right per acre. They can incentivize that by saying 1 development per acre from the sending area would actually equal 2 to 3 development rights per acre in the receiving area. So it helps to further promote the use of the program. Third tool in our box, county comprehensive plans and ag district zoning. So I don't have to spend a lot of time on this because I know you folks have been participating in this process for a number of years. But this is really how our voice can be heard about protecting ag. I will say that I've been doing land entitlement and development for decades now. And I would say that the team down at Canyon County Development Services has been very sophisticated in finding ways to add ag protection elements to this comp plan update. And so I'll give them a lot of credit for that. And so, as you've been hearing in those meetings, it generally, incentivizes the development in the existing areas of improvement, which limits the cost of community services. When we start fragmenting our ag land outside of the city limits, and those cities are having to send those services that far, when we annualize those over 30 years, it starts to get very expensive. And so it also promotes a mix of affordable housing types around employment centers. I mean, that is key, right? I mean, we're also hearing about the housing crisis in the Treasure Valley. So comp planning helps us to get that housing diversity that we need and closer to where the jobs are. And then finally, it lessens the impact of long commute times, right? And the cost of that. Before you know it, we're having to widen roads and put in signaled intersections. All of that is very, very expensive. And then the one thing that good planning does for us, I mean, you'll hear this come from a certain demographic, is that comprehensive planning is an infringement on private property rights. And I would say just the opposite is the case. Good planning protects everybody's property rights. All right, it doesn't single anyone out, it protects everybody. So I think so let's talk about Sunny Slope. So Development Services a couple of weeks ago did some breakout groups around this agritourism overlay zone that's being proposed in the comp plan for Sunny Slope. And so, as you're all aware, primary intention right now is to clarify and expedite the process for landowners to add secondary agritourism related businesses within that primary ag zoning. So example, the tasting rooms, cafes, event centers, and potentially even start to put some specifics in there on hoteling, like short-term rentals, kind of a thing. What Katie and I have been talking about, and was a primary driver for us to get together here today, was that this could be the first step in what could become a future agritourism district. And what's different about that is that Idaho state law, which makes it difficult for a local option tax, right? They make it difficult for municipalities and counties to raise sales tax. So I won't call it a loophole, but one opportunity within that, though, is to do allow for impact fees. So when we create improvement districts, so example is Boise has it, I believe it's called the Downtown Stadium District. that collects an added sales tax on hotel stays. And that impact fee that's collected is then put aside and will be available for the city of Boise to be able to apply towards any sort of future event center infrastructure in downtown Boise. So if we were to apply that concept to the Sunny Slope Agritourism District, it would have essentially its own operating board. It'd be essentially like a pseudo governmental entity with its own operating board that could be collecting its own impact fees. You know, what that would look like, you know, what a tax on what kind of services it would be to be determined. But then in the charter for that district, you would be able to specifically define how those monies would then be put to use, in particular to continue to protect and promote the district. So if you remember earlier on, we were talking about the purchase of development rights programs, right? And the need for finding sources of money to pay for those conservation easements, to compensate landowners for those conservation easements. Some percentage of the impact fees that this district would collect could go to then help pay for those conservation easements, which then in turn is protecting the sustainability of the district, right? The more we put this district into conservation easement, then the greater potential we have at the longevity of the district and it not being fragmented. So that would be one example. Another example would be, you know, one of the primary drivers for coming to visit the agritourism district is to experience that agricultural quality of life. Well, if we have hundreds of cars driving around back and forth between wineries and cafes and concerts and all of that, well, that's gonna not be so great, right? So another example where an impact fee would be is an impact fee could go to some sort of master transportation plan for the district. Something that creates, you know, paved parking lots out on the perimeter of the district. And then we have bike trails. We have paved bike trails. We potentially have a circulator bus that runs on clean fuels, right? So it protects our air quality, it keeps the dust down, it keeps the congestion down on the roads are more safe. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that a district would be able to continue to help promote itself and protect itself. And in the end, what we'd be creating in this district would be an economic hub. This would then become an economic hub in Canyon County. So what's next in this is that AFT, we have what we call our Idaho Ag Roundtable. Our next roundtable is going to be on Tuesday, April 19th. I believe I've got my dates right. Check me if I don't. I'm going to have a couple of folks on that call talking about agricultural districts in general, and in particular, an agritourism district. A very fine example. So the good news is that these exist in other places, so we don't have to recreate the wheel. We have a lot of lessons learned that we can bring to it. So I'll just wrap up and just say that you know, be an advocate for ag protection, actively participate in your comp plan. I know most of you have for Canyon County. Thank you very much. I would also say, you know, tell the Idaho Farm Bureau you want solutions. We crossed a major hurdle here last December. The Idaho Farm Bureau adopted a policy saying that they want a seat at the table to define ag protection programs for Idaho. That's a really, and I know it sounds nuanced, but that's actually a really big deal. So, you know, Farm Bureau represents a broad brush of all kinds of growers. So having them on board is really important. So the more that they hear from their constituency about wanting solutions, the better. And then finally, I'll just say, be a leader in your community and protect your land. You know, be one of those to be the first to stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to try this conservation easement thing out, and show everybody else it's not that scary. So that is all I had to share with everybody for right now. Katie, I'd say let's have a conversation.
Yeah, Michaela asked, is the map that you have shown all the areas to be included?
This is the overlay zone, is that right? Are we talking about this map?
Yeah.
So it is this, sorry, I didn't clarify that. It's this red sort of diagonal hash, right? So it's essentially along the Karcher Road 55 alignment, and then follows down through the Sunny Slope area all the way down to the river. So that is the area that's currently being proposed. There's a little bit of it kind of zigzags a little bit along the north side of Lake Lowell right here too.
It should also encompass a strip along Highway 95 between Wilder and the city of Parma.
Yes, the hop corridor.
And Tina, you had a comment in there. Do you want me to read that, or do you just want to speak to that?
I can't, you know, we had a meeting the other day with the county, and we were told that for purposes of the comprehensive plan, they have pulled the agritourism overlay, I think because they haven't been able to really define it, the definition and what it's encompassing. And so I guess maybe, David, here's what maybe you could speak to, because I think this is the question that came up during that conversation, is an agritourism overlay allows for some commercial development, which would be some restaurants and maybe a hotel and that type of a thing. And there were some people in the room who don't want any of that. So with that division between what the concept of an agritourism was, the county, instead of trying to resolve those differences or define them, they just want to get the comp plan passed and then come back in and do the agritourism overlay. I don't know what direction they're going to go, but that was the last information that I had. Is there anybody else that has anything subsequent to that on this call? So
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't talked with Elizabeth and Kate, oh gosh, for, I don't know, about a couple of weeks. So it sounds like this has happened fairly recent. Yeah, Tina? Yeah,
maybe a week ago, if that. Okay. I think there was a meeting actually a week ago today, where Tammy Holcomb, their economic development person, mentioned that it had been pulled. But I don't think it's a dead topic. I think it's just not enough thought and consideration put into what exactly does it mean. And I think that your information is very beneficial on what's the difference, because when you talk about transfer and purchase of development rights, I think that preserves ag more than having an agritourism overlay. That's just me personally. It's no policy or public person thing. That's just Tina saying, what are you trying to preserve, which is agriculture, versus promoting it. So that's just me. Sorry.
Yeah, I absolutely can see how where they're at with that, and that's the interest. So whether this overlay is in the comp plan or not, it would still on the, so let's say that it stays in, it were to stay in and gets approved in the update as is, it still has to have essentially the code, right? The actual code written for it. So it sounds like really what they're doing is they're just, kicking the can down the road a little bit, and say, because the planning process does allow for, the code still has to be written, whether it's done before the update's approved or after the update's approved. So what I'm promoting with Elizabeth, Kate and Tammy is that how we decide to write that code, draft that code, let's do that. It is so that we are essentially setting ourselves up for success with a future district, right? Let's set us up so that it can help facilitate that.
I think that when you have that conversation, the conversations that I've had, it's been about what's the stronger protection. I think your conservation easements are very strong, probably the strongest protection that you can reinforce with comprehensive plan and ordinance. But when you put a covenant on the land, it's a covenant on the land, right? And so to me, that's the strongest protection. But it's a point of view of what is better. And I think the conversation is wonderful. I think we need to continue having it and then do something.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned that a district, so I'm going to advance here a little bit and go a little bit deeper on a slide here. Easement valuation, right? So landowners need to be compensated for the value of that easement. And so that money has to come from somewhere. And one of the challenges that we have here in Idaho is that right now, that even though we have potential for that 50% match from NRCS, Idaho is only getting on average about $3 million a year. So for all of you that are landowners and you know what land pricing has done here in the last decade, that, as you can see here on this chart, the easement value is a percentage of the total land value. So what we're seeing happening here is that because we are still getting a fairly small piece of the pot from NRCS, then one or two easement projects in the state can burn up that couple $1 million really fast. So one of the things we're working on at AFT is looking at alternative funding sources. And one of those would be what are called PACE programs. And so this is the conversation that I'm having with the Idaho Farm Bureau and other stakeholders is, how could Idaho stand up in its own version of a PACE program? And so, that'll be really interesting, right? Because we live in a conservative state, no big government, no government overreach, no new funding, right? So we definitely have a headwind. We definitely have a headwind in that space. That said, the position that I'm taking, and feel free to use this tagline, back to that map that I showed you. Our agricultural economy is 20% of our GDP. So, we are an ag state. And so it is in the best interest of Idaho's long-term economic sustainability that we protect ag. So, so that's, we'll see which way the winds blow. The good news is that we did hear from the state, from our representatives, our policy folks, that the House Ag Committee is not going to tackle ag protection in this session, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. We have a lot more work to do to get people in alignment before it goes there. So I will wrap up in saying the concept of a agritourism district could be one of those alternative funding sources to pay for those conservation easements. So I see a hand up, Katie, and I think Amy, you had a hand up.
Michaela just had a question, and she had said, we are on Deer Flat and Map Rock with plans and goals to work towards agritourism. So once a conservation easement is in place, is it permanent?
Yes. Yep. They are in perpetuity. one of the conversations that we would have, you know, to maybe soften those headwinds with some sort of state level program would be that rather than we do ag protection and conservation in perpetuity, there's many models, especially here in the West, where they're called actually term easements or otherwise called conservation agreements. And so what we actually do is we put a time delimiter on these. So what it does is that, you know, who knows what's down the future, right? Who knows what's to come? So instead of in perpetuity, we could possibly be doing 10, 20, maybe 30-year conservation agreements, which still do, I mean, they're amazing, because really the way to think about that is that's like tapping the brakes, right? That's just saying, whoa, wait a minute, things are happening way too fast. I'm not confident that the comp planning is getting out ahead of this fast enough. So, you know, a term easement just helps us punch the brakes a little bit and slow down a little bit. Amy, what was your question?
I was just curious, David, with the PACE other programs, what are other states doing or looking at, or you've maybe seen or heard that have been successful for them, out of curiosity?
Right. So let's see. So Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, which is being implemented by the Oregon Agricultural Trust, is actually is in their legislature. So the program was approved 2 years ago. However, it exists only on paper. They got a little bit of a cash infusion just to do the administrative setup on the program, and then they've been hanging in the wind. So they have a bill in their legislature pending right now to then do permanent state funding into the program. And so, I think they're looking at this on the scale of, you know, I think that the last time we talked was probably like 10 to 15 million a year set aside for that program. Another example would be Skagit County up in Washington State, another ag area up there. They are collecting property tax. It's an add-on to property taxes. Because their county is primarily ag, then essentially having a portion of those property taxes going to help protect the local economy was very doable for that community, which is interesting because it happens to be one of the most conservative places in Northwest Washington. Has been very successful. They've been at it for 25 years. That program's 25 years old. They're actually running out of farms to protect. That's how successful that program has been. And then the third example I'll give you is Chaffee County, Colorado. The Central Colorado Conservancy, which is a land trust, partnered with the county, and so Chaffee County, surprisingly, I can't believe that this is the case, but it's in the path of growth of Denver Metro. Denver's gotten that big. And so what they saw it coming, you know, and then they're mostly a ranching community. For those of you that maybe are not close to the ranching business, but you know, cattle pricing is highly volatile right now. And unfortunately, we're only seeing like $1 a pound on our calf prices. And so the ranching economy is really feeling strained. And so a lot of those landowners just saw the March developers coming over the mountain at them, and they approached the land trust and said, what can we do? So they ultimately approved a 1/4 cent sales tax at the county level that is now going to pay for term easements. And so what that money does is it compensates the landowner to not sell, subdivide, or transfer water rights on 5-year intervals. So it pumps the brakes. But the other thing I like about that program is it also gives landowners a taste just, you know, kind of just, I'm going to test drive. I'm going to test drive this whole sort of easement thing. And one of their first people to join the program was like 2 years in, and like, you know what, this is not bad at all. And so they're going on into the full perpetuity. So into the full easement process. So those are some examples.
Sabrina mentioned, and Sabrina, maybe you could speak to this, but she said she has a contact at the regional government in Skagit County, and she's going to reach out to them for more details.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I can, you know, I can actually, if you're interested, so this was a topic on the Idaho Ag Roundtable just a month ago. And I will do a reply all to this, or actually I'll just get it to you, Katie, because I think you own the invite. And so I'll do send you the link to the video. We did record that. All right. So all three of those examples that I gave you were presenters on that. And it was a really great presentation.
That would be awesome. One of the things, Katie and David at a meeting, I think it was just last week, out at Kindred with some of the wineries, we talked about that if anybody has these examples, if they would just email them to the info at the Sunny Slope Wine Trail email address, and we'll get a Google Drive set up. So I know most of the people on this call is from out in our area, but then we can just all share that. So for example, Skagit, if I have a contact there, other people probably have other contacts, but maybe we can get a little more detail, and then we're not all having to duplicate, but we can share that information and just educate ourselves more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great. So Michaela has a question. If the conservation easement is something we are interested in, who do we talk to? A lawyer who specializes in this?
So I would say that the place to start is here in Idaho, and actually I will bounce, I'll show you this really quick. So here in Idaho, the agricultural protection conservation easements, we do these through in partnership with our land trusts, our land trust partners, right? Because you need that third party to hold that easement. And so for those of us here in the Treasure Valley, that is going to be the Land Trust of Treasure Valley. That's Eric Grace over there at LTTV. And he's actually done a number of these ag easements already. So he's very well versed in the program and the partnership with NRCS to get that 50% match. And so I would say that the conversation starts with Eric and myself. I am also a facilitator of that program here.
Thanks so much. Are there any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I just had a real quick question. This is Hadley at Hell's Canyon Winery. David, are there sort of acreage requirements with the easements or anything like that?
So no, the short answer to that is no. The NRCS, if you're choosing to do the NRCS match, they do have a standard list of national scale criteria. So
okay.
They're looking at like soil type, soil quality. They're looking at essentially like what is the overall value add of protecting a particular piece of ground, irrespective of its size, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Idaho NRCS team, we have our own, and I say we because I'm part of that team, we have our own Idaho criteria that we're also looking at through that. So we're really careful about not doing a one size fits all. I think we have to look at every piece of land. For example, Eric's the next project that Eric has in the pipeline is a very large farm up on the banks of the Boise River north of Caldwell, and we're talking like close to 1,500 acres the landowner would like to conserve. That's very large. so large that it's really too big a bite of to chew all at once. So what we're looking at is one of the national criteria is that the question says, is the proposed project proximal to any other conserved land that's already been conserved, right? So what I told Eric is I said, okay, so figure out where's your cornerstone parcel, where's your cornerstone, 200-acre parcel that all other future parcels are contiguous with. Because then future applications get ranked higher, right? Because we're stacking them next to
Right.
right? So yeah, I would say that it's really looking at each opportunity stands on its own.
Okay, and then I just had another question. There's a property next to us that's been for sale, formerly in ag. And I don't know the status of it at the time, but do you guys go out and solicit properties at all? Or is it completely up to the landowner to find out that option?
Yeah, really interesting question. So, so ag protection using conservation easements is something that's just been it's not new to Idaho, but the development pressure just wasn't kicking in until the last really 5 years, right? 5 years that the pressure's been on. So this program's just been kind of ticking along in the background, and it's just been entirely on a voluntary basis. And so now we've crossed that threshold, right? Development pressure is on. And so I'd mentioned at the beginning of my presentation about a marketing program. So we're a nonprofit, so we got to figure out how to do this on the fly. So bear with me, but I think one of our cheapest inroads is getting one of our donors has a trucking aspect to their business. So we're thinking about borrowing some of their semi-trailers and getting them out on landowners who are ag protection advocates, and then getting our No Farms, No Idaho banner on the side of those trucks, right? Or in other ways, we'll see. Josie at Peaceful Belly Farm, I said, you are on a perfect corner. And she says, yes, I am. She says, but no way in hell are you going to put a semi truck on it. So that said, I would say for all of you on this call, just even having a little bit of sign space in your tasting rooms or a sign out on your road frontage for us would be huge. All right. So, and our goal there is that with that website is that we're going to tell a couple of stories. We're going to give a little bit of information about how fast this conversion is occurring. But more importantly, the sole purpose of this marketing campaign is getting people to sign up as grassroots stakeholders. And so there's going to be a form there for people to give us their information. And we're going to have a box on there, Hadley, that says, are you a landowner interested in protecting your farm or your ranch? And then that's going to act as a funnel that's going to start pulling more projects into this. We got to be careful what we ask for, because we're in this sort of strange situation with NRCS. Like I say, right now we're only getting about $3 million a year. NRCS National says, yeah, but you know what? When we see Idaho putting in applications calling for 10 million a year, then we know that's a priority, and we got to start sending more money that way. The other good news is the Farm Bill, right? We have the next rewrite on our Farm Bill, and it looks like ag protection as a component to basically addressing climate change is going to bring more money into this ASAP ALE program, right? So I think it's going to add, maybe, we talked about those national level criteria. I think one of the things they're going to be looking for is, landowners, farmers and ranchers to add some soil health practices to their operations that are pulling either essentially holding more carbon, right? Sequestering more carbon in the soil could come with that. But I will tell you, that is no reason to scare anybody off. I mean, simply adding compost and cover crop to your operations is more than enough to get to sequester carbon. So it's not going to be a heavy lift to still be able to access millions of dollars.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Thoughts? All right.
All
Well,
right.
I want to say thank you to David. I really appreciate your time. And I was mentioning to David that Fair Idaho advocates on behalf of our members. So if we have an issue, I learned about this just attending the Sunny Slope Wine Trail meeting, and was grateful to learn about this. But we are an advocacy organization, so these roundtables help us assess what our next direction will be in terms of looking at policy or support. And so thank you very much for everyone taking the time. I know Sunny Slope and the development pressures that you're facing there are of concern. And so thank you very much for attending. And I will make sure to send this video out to everyone that attended this call, and some more information about Fair Idaho. And then you'll have my contact information. If you have any further questions to David, I'll make sure to loop him in and CC him. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. And David, thanks so much for your time and your knowledge. I know we're grateful for your ideas and your thoughts, especially protecting farmland, which is so critical right now.
I appreciate that. Thanks for your time, everybody. I'm sure we'll see each other soon again.
Yeah. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.